manage your information so that you can find the information you need when you need it. I'm very glad to be here, and I'm glad to have some helpers with me. So if anyone is commenting something in the chat or something, I will have help to see that. Yes, my name is Hanya. I work for SoftSkills in Norway as a consultant in the field of information management. SoftSkills delivers business consulting, digital services, software development. We have offices in Oslo and Stavanger and Trondheim, and we're also opening offices now in Drammen and Bergen. So I just wanted to say a few words about SoftSkills before I start on today's topic. We have expertise in a number of industries. It's always like, what do these consultancy houses do? So we're in transport and retail and energy and health, and deliver a lot of different digital services, strategy services. My division is business consulting, and you see information management there at the bottom left. And our priority areas is digital strategy, digital culture, and data-driven business. And I wanted to share with you 2 opportunities that I think might be interesting now or when you're done with your degree or getting close to it. And it's the summer job, the 6-week summer jobs that we offer, where you get to work on real customer deliveries. There's a lot of lectures, discussion groups, where you can work on your consultancy skills and build network and have a lot of fun. And we also have a graduate program that I see. We're always, looking to recruit also people within the field of information management, but it's also can be other things. I'm not sure here who's here or what your fields are, but is a full-time employment. But the first 12 months, there's like a special program where you learn a lot. You get to take a lot of courses and certifications, and to get like a good kickstart to your career. So follow us, and if you want to hear more about it, you can also contact me afterwards. So for today's topic, info management, yes, and collaboration in Microsoft 365, and also, we can think beyond a little bit as well. I will give an introduction to the topic, and then I want to have some group work using Miro. So I'll share the link with you when we get there. I'll stop a little bit and say a few things about why you should be interested, why you should manage your information or your company's information before we do one more group exercise in Miro. And then I round up with a few examples of best practice. I don't know if there's any questions or anything before I get started. We're not that many, so you feel free to unmute and if you want to say something or use the chat. I see there's someone in the waiting room, so I guess there will be more people just joining as we go, and that's just great. I think the chat is like a good channel now and also later to just, if there's something you need or something, I don't know, that you need to give us feedback. If you don't want to unmute, you can always just write a message. Okay, it's always strange with these digital meetings where I don't see faces, so I'm looking at Pascal at least and Amalia. So looks like it's okay. Yes, so to this topic, what is information management? Let me start there. I like to group it into 3 categories. It's the knowledge management, the digital collaboration, and records management. And they work together and they rely on each other. And why is this? I don't know. It's not a new topic, but it's because of the information explosion and all the systems that we work in, about it's changed, like how we manage our information. It's not like if beforehand you could think, see, this is you working, you have, a paper-based world. um, it's easier to manage information that way, whereas now there's so many systems, devices, security. How do you know if your copy is secure or not? There might be artificial intelligence, and you have like programs running that you need to take into account. What's in the cloud? Do you still have some files and some folders? Um, what about using, you work on your phone, you work on your computer? So these are things that take a slightly different form. And I want to just also, like, now in the beginning, say a few things, like, what is Microsoft 365? I think a lot of you through studies or work know a bit about it. I couldn't find one that was updated with, it used to be Office 365 and then they rebranded into Microsoft 365. But as far as I can tell, it's the same apps and the same components. I think it's quite up to date. So Microsoft 365 is a lot of things, as you can see. And for the purpose of this workshop and now, as an introduction, we'll focus on just parts of it. And it's mostly Teams that I meet a lot in my workday, but also the use of Outlook, of emails, work emails, how we use SharePoint, and also OneDrive. So I just want that you, like, we were on the same note. I mean, what is Microsoft 365? It's these four that I'm thinking of the most, and that I want you to sort of have in mind when we talk about, all this digital information and where to keep it and store it and work on it. And my examples towards the end are also very in line with, companies implementing Teams and new ways of working, new ways of digital working with their information. But let me get a little bit more into these three, wheels that work together. We have knowledge management. And I guess when we talk about information management, you can also think about your personal information for when we're working on it afterwards. But this is most, in a business perspective, like your organization or company take measures to preserve, to refine, and further develop the company's knowledge. And the objective is that people who work there can tap into the knowledge and make use of it, that we can learn from each other, that you have some sort of system where you can accumulate knowledge. And for this to be able, that you can do this, the knowledge has to be explicit and known. And one thing is about, documents that, or is it reports, or where you can look up and read and find knowledge, but it can also be people, just so you know, new employees, who can they, knock on the door or call up on Teams to talk to tap into that knowledge. So the relevant tools, I'm also listing, the intranet or the company's homepage. But Teams, like in the Microsoft 365 world, it's Teams and Power BI or other dashboards from other analysis tools are relevant here, like to use for management. And then digital collaboration. In this context, it's about working together, the tools and the systems where we create or store information that is sent to us. We want effective processes. Often you want to, you're working on something and someone else is also going to look at it and work on it. Maybe you need to save and close the program so that someone else can open it and then continue in that file. Or there are options to co-produce, which is one of the things in the Microsoft 365 environment that is so great, that you can at the same time work together and edit and cooperate. And another thing is that it should be easy to reuse information, that you have places where you can store and collaborate. Like someone had a presentation and you want to use some of those slides, just tweak them a little bit. Where do you collaborate? What kind of system? Like the classical is the file share system where you have like folders inside folders, and then you have to navigate. In Microsoft 365, I'm thinking Teams and also SharePoint. I see that's not here. Is like a place where you can collaborate. And Yammer, and you have also Workplace by Facebook, or Slack, or Confluence. I mean, there are many tools that are relevant here. And then the third wheel of these cogs that work together is records management. And what are records? I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this because it's not a term that everyone is familiar with. But records are proof of business transactions, and they contain information that the business needs, or you as you have some records in your personal life as well. But in a company perspective, it's mostly for compliance, that you comply to GDPR or other laws or regulations. A typical example of a record would be like the transcript of your grades from your exam. That's proof that you have, studied this and you did pass, and this is the result that you got. So that is a record for you that you need to, keep or know where it is. And what makes a record not just, any document is that it ensures authenticity and integrity, reliability, and availability. And this, in essence, means that you can trust that it is what it proclaims to be. Like you can check that the person who wrote it did write it, that it hasn't been tampered with, like the dates or the author or the content. You can rely on the integrity of it, and that it's available. Like it must be something that you can find when you need it. And this goes throughout the document's life cycle. And I don't know if any of you have heard of before, like if you applied for a job, you needed to attach and have like copies that were stamped with like, this is the right copy. You had to go to an office to get that. And now it's not like a paper document, and when you apply for a job, you'll get, upload your link here, and if they're checking, or when they're checking your references, they just click on it and they get right into a database where they see the transcript. They see that, yes, it's issued by this and this university, and they are sure that it's the right document, the right record. So relevant tools here are not so much in the Microsoft environment. These are systems that manage records and archives. And just to put them a little bit in perspective, because I now also mentioned archive, like what are records? You have information management that is all information, both structured and unstructured. It could be, an article on the intranet, or it could be a newsletter that's sent out. And records are also information. They contain information, but we sort of limit them in, so they're also structured or unstructured, but they're information that is needed as proof. So it's like a smaller group of information. And then you have inside there again, you have archive, which is records that need to be retained, say for 5 years or 10 years, or maybe even for 100 years or longer. So just to sort of sort a little bit between those. And I'm thinking now, I want you to warm up by getting into Mira. I'm going to share a link to you. It's in the chat, so I hope you can all access it, and that you click on the link and get to the Miro board. Okay, I think we're all back now. Give you maybe a moment, and I'll go back to sharing my presentation. Let's see here. It was really great to see the post-its that you put up, and I see you're really, what should I say, thinking the right thoughts and have been discussing and got up a lot in this brainstorm. It's not a very long time, and I know that maybe the terms like information management, it's not that familiar to you, but I think we got up a lot of really good points. Yes, so let's just I just need to get all the windows in the right place. So yeah, the importance of managing your information. I sort of want to, it sounds like, I want to sell it to you and convince you that it's important. And I guess it is to me, because a lot of people think, why not just keep everything, or what's so important, to deal with. And I think especially for you as a group of students, I think this is like a great chance to create good habits already now. And to me, this is a skill that is valuable when you get into your work life, but also for yourself in your personal life. So yeah, why not just keep everything? You get to a point where you can't because of GDPR, or you have to think about information security. Especially like in work situations, there are a lot of laws. Like in Norway, we have um, laws on what has to be archived, and with how we process applications and work, casework, and laws about what has to be publicly known. Like maybe you work for um, for a public office that has to have things on there, like others have to be able to find out what are you working on, like, and then they need to be able to ask um, to see, some documents. So these are reasons that no, you have to have a system for managing and for keeping track, for sorting, and also for deleting. And I also wanted to add this because I saw, is it second Monday in February? It's like a national clean out your computer day. And I don't know if it's national in Norway, but national somewhere. I saw it's another company, it's Atea, who had this campaign. That it's in Norwegian, but I'll explain quickly. Which I think is really interesting. They were like, if everyone in Norway deletes just one email each, the reduce for the environment would be like to drive in Norway with up and down 10 times. So it's true that technology drives initiatives to stop climate change, but there's also this increase in digital information implies an increase in the data storage and the bandwidth, which is all, not great for the environment. And they had this whole list of, I'm not going to read all of it, but you can look at it later on if you haven't already seen it. I thought it was really interesting because it makes you aware of that it matters, the things you keep. And all these, like, big, if you have copies here and you have copies there. So they had like this campaign to like delete things that you don't need, if there's old newsletter letters, or if you have copies stored several places. So if you want to reduce your ecological footprint, then managing your information is actually also relevant. And when I say, like, managing information, I like to talk of, like this life cycle. You have a point where information is produced, like a picture is taken or a report is written, or someone else, it's you or someone else, and it's captured somewhere. Like maybe it's put into, Google Drive, or you store it in the archive system, or you store it somewhere in a SharePoint room. Hopefully you will classify it somehow just by putting it in its right folder, or maybe, applying labels as you store it. And then a lot of these things you need to collaborate on. you're working with others. Maybe not everything, but many things are either sent to someone when you're done with it, or you actually work with other people on it. And then a lot of documents, a lot of files, information needs to be used. And now I'm talking a lot about, I picture these, Excel files or Word files or picture files, but they can also be entries into a database, a row of information. And who needs that information, who uses it, and when and how often. So there's a loop here because things can be, classified again or used again, collaborated on again, and it goes round and round. But at some point, uh, it should be or must be deleted. And when I write transfer here, it's like transferred to the archive for like long-term preservation. Um, and then at some point you send it like, from your company, or from, like, you don't pay to have it stored on your own service, but the archive, like the national one, will take care of it. So when I talk life cycle and when I want to discuss information further with you, it's this life cycle that I want you to like be introduced to and to think about. So yeah, what's in it for me? It's mostly about finding the information you need, because the longer we live, the more projects we're involved with, the more we work, there's a lot of information, and we tend to just accumulate. So it's finding it, but it's also, finding it when you need it. I could have included, there's a slide about, how many hours is spent looking for information. I mean, it's very depressing. You have, people working, and this is something that executives are very like worried about, because people spend a lot of time looking for information at work. So you want to, first of all, to find it, but also find it when you need it and not spend too long looking for it. And uh, just as important is that you want to be confident that you have the right information, that it's the correct version of the document or the contract. It's the one that's actually signed, and not the previous copy that you changed something on, or in your database that it's actually, this is true. It's not, some colleague who puts have some notes on his or her desk that haven't been updated in the database yet. So I think what's in it for you guys, it's most of all this. And I also wanted to, I should maybe, I don't know, have made a separate slide, but it's also about ensuring that others find the information they need, because most of us, we work in an environment with other people. So it's about collaborating with others, that others can learn and find what you do useful. But also it's about laws, doing things correct, because it depends on what you work with or what you study, but there are also a lot, especially with the GDPR, there's a lot of regulations in place. Like, it's not just keeping lists of people who attended this seminar and store it, wherever you like, or duplicate it as many times as you like, because these are things that have changed a lot the last years. So yeah, it's easier to find what you need if you delete what's not important, or you delete things that when you no longer need it, and that you categorize what's valuable. And it's also important, that you don't delete something that you might need. So to have that, reflect on what might I need later on, and what might I not need. Do I need a copy? Maybe yes. And I saw one mention, like, you have backups. So yes, it's like, don't delete too much, because then you won't find what you need. So that's the balance that you have to figure out. So this is the last slide before we do one more round in Miro. It's not the text on this one that's so important, but I want us to talk about the difference between, all your information, and then the gems, the information that is important, because no one needs to plan for, all your information. You just need to sort some things. Some things you can quickly throw away. Some things you quickly recognize that this is important, and I need to spend time categorizing it and making a decision on where to store it. And then there are some other things that, maybe not. Don't spend too much time on that, because if not, you won't be having enough time to do the things that you need to do. So I don't know if anyone has any comments or questions before we go to the next breakout room session. And I hope you also take a moment to take a little break. My very good helper will now put us into groups again, and we'll meet in Miro. Maybe I can explain before you split us into groups, I can explain just quickly. Let's see, now I am moving to Miro. I can explain the exercise, and I'll do the same thing as last. I'll go
Sorry,
I'll go from room to room.
so can you share the link again? I joined with my sister. I can't find the link now.
Sure. Let's see.
Thank
Where
you.
can I? Maybe one of my helpers can do that, because where is that chat?
Okay.
I'll do it either now or in a couple of minutes.
I did.
Oh,
And
wonderful.
I'll also do when we go into breakout rooms.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Give me just one moment, and I'll explain just what we're doing first. Let's see here if I can pull you to meet. Yeah, we could maybe also share this on the screen if you want to, because now I just have the sorting exercise there. But what I want you now is to think about that picture that I showed with the gems and the blue circle and then the other information. And the sorting exercise is to write down different types of information or documents or rows of information in a database. And you can go back and look at the previous exercise with, that you brainstormed, and look at what the other group did as well. And to put it on a sticky note, and the more concrete, the better, like the more specific, that it's not just broad and overall. And you can color code it by system so that you sort of see, what do I keep in my email, or what do I store on a file server or in a designated, system. And maybe group them a little bit by context. You can discuss. I want you to, turn on your cameras and discuss in your groups. And there's also a garbage bin here. So I hope, and it's very small. So, you can place things just on the outside of the circle to think about, maybe some newsletters that is very good. You want to receive them, you want to read them, but then you delete them when you're done with them. So place the sticky note where it belongs, in this big circle, the little circle, or the trash. Great, welcome back. Let's see here. So I see it's a little bit tricky, but you still put up a lot of things, which I like. And I've been reading a little bit and looking at it, and it's definitely good. I'm going to wrap up now in a moment, but before we go back to the presentation, I would really appreciate that you took a minute or two and give just some feedback to the use of Miro, because it's very useful for me. So if you could just put, one post-it or two, if there's anything that you really liked or something that you really missed or think could be improved. We'll just spend, I'll give you 1.5 minutes, and then I'll share my screen. And if someone wants to unmute and say something out loud, that's very welcome as well. Okay, I think I'll stop it at that. Good to see that many of you thought it was easy to use, and I know that it can be confusing at times. So that's good, or that's the way it is. And yeah, I don't know if you want to say something about what part of it was confusing. It doesn't have to be now, but for later reference. Okay, but I think we'll just move on now. I want to be finished at 6 at the very latest. And I want to, let's see here, I shared my screen. Yes, it works. I want to say a little bit about best practices. It's not easy, and I don't know if I've ever, I think I have yet to see organizations where really things work well. It's always room for improvement. I want to show you this. And keep in mind now that this is, say you want to implement Microsoft 365. and you have a timeline here from left to right, and the company has some, benefits that they want to realize. There's a reason why they want to implement a system. It could be any system, but let's, for the sake of this, keep our example to Microsoft 365. And yes, as the time goes by, you can see, it's not easy to implement systems, especially like very complex ones like Microsoft 365, that really require that people change the way they work or work in a specific way, and that there's a structure in place for that. So if you just bring on the technology and your business processes are bad, you won't get a lot of benefits from it. It will be bad in the beginning. It will be getting better, but to really reap benefits, the processes need to be in place. So we when we go in, we talk about PTO, and that's process, technology, and organization. So if your processes are okay and it's technology alone, you can end up getting some benefits. But if you also focus on, the P and the T, process and technology, you can reap more benefits. And if you combine and include also organizational efforts or change, then you can really reap benefits. And that's what I want to go into a little bit now. Because the processes are really core here. I mean, are there descriptions of the processes? Is there an overview of, the different functions that people do, and which processes they belong to? And do you know what's the core process? Like if you're a student, there's a process around, you need to go to the courses, learn something, you take notes, you have an exam, things, that's the process. If you work for AIESEC, like for now, there's a process for delivering events like this, where you have many steps, you do different functions, and if you have a smooth, well execution of the process, then you are in a better place if you want to implement a system to manage the information in that process. That's what I'm trying to get at. Oh, this is a time when I wish I could see your faces to sort of see, are you with me? I'm looking at Pascal. So if you really are worried or shaking your head, unmute and I'll try to explain better. But unclear processes make for unclear procedures, and whatever technology you add to it will not make the process any better or function any better. So to have clear processes is important. And then there's also the thing about the gap between the process and what people actually do. I don't know. I could also go for a process could also be, say you receive an application and you have a whole process for registering that application and replying to it, doing the casework to find out should you approve it or not. So this is the kind of things I'm talking about with processes. A process could also be onboarding, like you get new AIESEC members. How do you include them? You have a whole process, around that. And where do you store the information created at certain events or in that the line of the process? So that is the P. And then comes the technology, which in some cases I'm thinking this is the easy part. But here as well, you can use the technology, you can set up things in many different ways. You can there's some people talking about, you get Microsoft 365 out of the box. You just plug and play. And I would say very few systems are like that. Usually you need to take into account, how shall we make that system work for us in our student organization or in our company. So maybe you have some automated processes that you can, set up so that it works really well, or other workflows. Use of labels could be for sensitivity could be for, just a way of categorizing and keeping things so that the information ends up where you want it to be. To set up enterprise search is very expensive, but a lot of technology, I mean, what benefits do they want to reap? It's about making it easier to find information. So search is something that is discussed a lot. Like, how can we search within, is it in your Outlook, in your inbox, or do you search within, another system to find information? When I put legacy systems here, I mean like these outdated digital systems that need to be upgraded or maybe even just replaced, where you have a lot of information that might be business critical. And how do you handle those? How do you keep the information safe? What are you going to do to upgrade your systems? I also put a little, this is just a very introduction, so I'm not going into the depth of anything, but provisioning is, for example, if in Microsoft 365, you can set up who's allowed to create new teams and channels. Maybe you have some standards on how should we name them so that you have a system that the employees can find the right team. And also how long is that team supposed to exist, and when are we deleting it, or are we deleting it? And how do we use it, and rules for that. So the technology is an important part, and it's one of the PT and then the O. And I think you can't really say, oh, I just want to just do the technology. It's the three of them combined that give benefits. And digital culture is one. Do you have, and I guess that goes a little bit with that ambition for digitalization. Like, what is the level of maturity? Do you have an overall digital strategy? Like, how are the different systems going to work together? Um, Sometimes when we acquire a new system, like say, oh, we're going to use Trello or we're using Slack, but you're already having discussions on Messenger and Facebook, or on, it's just another system adding to the others. But what is the overview? How can we make this, a system that works together, where you don't have too many overlapping functions in different systems? And if there are, to make it clear when to use which system, when to work where. What store to have a process for evaluation of information, that what is valuable, what is business critical. Contracts, where do you keep them, here or there? What shall we name them? How long shall we keep them for? Maybe you have some case preparations that are very important for a certain time, but maybe at some point should be deleted. Like, how many do you need to go back a year? Do you need to go back 5 years? And then see where do you draw the line on what to keep or not? Often there's a lot of drafts before a report is finalized, and maybe just keeping the final report is enough and not all the other things. Within this organization, and how to work with organization, is both access control and ownership, like who owns the information, who owns the systems, and how do we can make sure that the laws and regulations are the system and the organization work in a way to meet the requirements and the need for confidentiality, that things aren't shared to people who shouldn't read it, and so forth. So that's just a very brief, also a method, how to move forward. I want to say, because Microsoft 365 is not plug and play, and many have tried and failed spectacularly, or just so. But the success factors are, you can't really start planning too early or to You need to define the goals, like what benefits or what do you want to achieve with implementing this system. Who are the stakeholders? Um, write out the use stories, and to bring awareness to your organization about it, why, and also training. And I want to say a little bit more about that awareness and training. I don't know if you are familiar with the ADCAR. It's a mindset for change management. And I would say a lot of these things that go to information management and systems, like how do we collaborate, it's about organizational change, like how do we work. And these are like steps where you plan before implementing. You're getting some new tools, or they're replacing old tools, and you have a goal, you have a plan, and you want to bring awareness to everyone, because if you bring on Microsoft 361, it's going to affect everyone in your company. And everyone should be aware that, yes, there is a need for change. We want this system, and there's a reason for it. And then to work, to the desire, so that people support and that they will be on your team to implement the change. If not, you'll get a lot of resistance, and people will be grumpy because there's, this doesn't work for me. I want to work on my old systems. And that will cause a lot of problems with managing information. And the next step is like knowledge, to share knowledge on how to implement the change and what is expected of the employees and about the managers. And then comes the part that is I think everyone will focus on, but it comes late. It's the ability, and this is maybe the traditional training, where you get training on how to execute the new tasks and what kind of habits, like where do we work and when. And then after that initial ability, the training, actions are needed also for reinforcement, so that people, sometimes you go to a training and they show you this is how we use Slack or Confluence or whichever system, and you sort of see it, but it takes a time for that change to stick and that you work in new ways. So you need to also plan for reinforcement activities. So yeah, how to, whoops. Yeah, you need somehow to set up some rules. What goes where? Where do we work? Where do we store things? Do we share links? Maybe instead of sending attachments or uploading a copy. That's like a very classical rule to put in. When do you use, Slack or Workplace by Facebook? Or when do you send an email? That kind of guidelines are also like clear rules. When you post a message, say on, I don't know which tools you use the most, but if it's on chat, if it's Slack or wherever it is, how do we respond and collaborate? Do you like to say that, yes, I've read it? Do you reply when you are tagged? Just having like clear rules for when do you tag and when do you not tag. These are things that someone has to think out, and it doesn't just happen on its own. Another thing is like using SharePoint libraries and set up so that you have things that are more short term. This is where we discuss and plan, but you have a place where okay, these documents, we're going to need them again next year or the year after, because they're good reference documents. We have like an event we do once a year, so we work on this now, and there's a lot of information that we don't need to save, but then there are some important documents. And then connecting maybe in Teams to a SharePoint library instead of using the tab for files could be a very good measure to ensure that you keep the information you want. And also to discuss maybe the structure, like shall you have, some places there's like folder inside folder inside folder, and how can you find things that your colleagues are working on? So making out, rules on that kind of things, and naming conventions, like what are the documents or things called, is very, very helpful. Yeah, if there's any questions now in between, feel free to break to unmute and stop me. I'm getting very close to the end, and I'm wondering how far into the examples I'm going to go. I'm going to at least show you this one. This is someone I worked on a project, and he made this like a quick overview of like, okay, you have information. Is it a record at this point? Because that's also like a discussion, like is it a draft for a report that will at some point be a record? Well, if it's not, is the file relevant for others? If yes, you put it in the relevant team, like for the project you're working on. I would also like to add here that it could be, you know, yes, it goes in SharePoint library X, or you put it on the intranet because it's relevant for many others. It depends on what you're working on. No, but you still, you know, it's interesting for you. You put it on OneDrive, which is like a place where you store things that is personal to you. Okay, if it is a record, yes, then where shall I store, you know, that final, oh, I see it's a little bit Norwegian here, sorry. Where shall I store the final version? In a dedicated software system, like in Norwegian, we have these fagsystemer. Very often it's, you know, some sort of database that you need to update, or, you know, it goes in a dedicated system. Or it can go in another, this is also sort of a fagsystem that goes, you know, this is where we keep all procedures or policies that are in place now. Yes, you put it there. Or this P360 is a records management system. Yes, if it's, you know, that kind of case work, it goes there. So that you have very like clear charts, something that you can communicate, that you know what goes where. Yes, I think I have a couple of examples, but they're in Norwegian. I don't know if anyone has questions, and I'd rather save some time for that before we round off. Or are you curious to see one example? This is also in Norwegian. I'll go quickly through it. I was at on a project working for, this is one of the directories. Direktoratet is for forvaltning og økonomistyring. I'm not sure what their Norwegian name is, but they wanted principles for good records management. So they had 7 principles about, you know, the records or documentation has to be open and available to employees, so long as there weren't regulations and, you know, according to the law that said that it couldn't. And the documents had to be managed and kept according to laws and regulations. All documentation needed to have an owner. That's a very interesting and an important thing. And documentation is to be found in one place. You need to know what's the master document. And it should be clearly, you know, that this is finished, or if it's a draft. And you want to be able to trace, like documentation should be able to be traced. You should be able to trust it and that you can use it again. And it should, number 6, should be structured and standardized. And the documentation needs to have titles and be classified, like descriptive titles, so that it's easier to find. And just to show you like how when they implemented Microsoft 365, and then they said, you know, how can we use these principles now in this process of implementing Microsoft 365? So the first one was, okay, so when we have teams, they should be open so that people could, you know, find them. They shouldn't be secret teams. And the documentation that, you know, that you manage it correctly, a lot of this meant that it had to be in WebSoc, which is one of those records management systems, because that ensures that this principle is kept. And number 3, about the ownership, then they, you know, described how the project, they needed to have ownership, and like who's responsible in when you work on, say, organizing this event, who has the ownership, and to define that. And number 4, they had to specify that, you know, there's a difference between a document and a document. What's a record and what's just a copy, and that you can have the record or what's documentation in one place, but you can have other copies that you need to work with other places, but you need to know what's the official, what's the master, what is the record, and that the others are deleted when you don't need them any longer. Yes, number 5, just some processes have to go in a certain system. And number 6 about being standardized and structured is, and you have to use, what's that in English again? Like when it's relevant that you use a certain format and you stick to that, and you sort of have to find out if that exists or not. And then with the descriptive titles, here it goes to both documents, but also teams to have like naming conventions. So that was my quick last example. And that's about it. I have 2 tips at the very end, and that's if you're interested in learning more about information management, I'd like to give you a tip about AIM, which is Intelligent Information Management Community, that they have like a newsletter. I think they have a lot of interesting articles. And I also want to give you a tip about infotection. This, screenshot is maybe a bit strange, but they have a lot of really interesting webinars that are for free. And I especially think the things about governance and machine learning with Microsoft 365 from the perspective of information is very interesting. So thank you for listening.
I have a question though, Han.
Yes, please.
How would you recommend as a potential employee who is going to work in Supersteria to hone their skills in terms of information management in order to improve his or her chances to get a role in Supersteria?
Interesting question. I think wherever you end up working, I mean, this is a skill that's needed of all employees. Like, you need to be able to find the stuff you need when you need it. And there are a lot of requirements. I mean, especially, of course, in the public sector that have a lot of regulations, but also in like now I'm working in the private sector, and finding, managing knowledge and finding your information is just as important. So what I think is inspiring about talking to students is about, think about it already now, like get into good habits, and that awareness, I think, gets you a long way. Because it's something that doesn't happen by itself. You have to sort of be conscious about, what is what and where do you keep it, and what kind of structure is helpful to you, or how. There's no one way to do it. It can be done different ways. But when you come into an organization, there's usually, or there should be, if they have good information management, there are rules that you need to comply to and follow. There is like a right way to do things. I don't know if that is helpful.
Yes, that is. Thank you so much. Perhaps I could also ask a follow-up question as well.
Sure.
When it comes to segregating both internal data and external data, that is data used internally by employees and data managed with clients or customers, what kind of governance is in place to handle those kind of scenarios?
Yeah, that is an important thing, because there's usually things that are internal that you work with and others that you share. I know it's solved in different ways, but we have very clear guidelines on that. And I think that goes for most sectors and things you work with, that there are stuff that is categorized as sensitive or that you're not allowed to share and not. I know when I work on several projects, we have, we set up one team with a set of channels where we work with the client, and then we have a separate one where we work internally, like where we track, say, costs, and we have a lot of drafts when we write our delivery reports that we can discuss and sort of work internally before we discuss it and share it with the clients. So thinking out structures and knowing what to share and links. Also, a thing is like sometimes when I share links to say, I need feedback or what do you think of this draft, it's available for only say 2 weeks, and then if the link, if that person saves the email and wants to click on it later, it won't open like the document. So a lot of guidelines on that kind of things, like how we share information and most specifically where we work, like what are you allowed to place where in which system.
That's interesting. That's interesting. And I noticed in your presentation you featured a lot of examples. In fact, our exercise was also based on Microsoft 365, right? Would you say that's a company specific thing or it's an industry standard?
Yeah, I was very much back and forth, and I'm thinking Microsoft 365, at least in Norway, is so big now that the chances for in a huge degree or a small degree that you interact with the Microsoft programs is very big. So I'm thinking it's relevant to have some sort of basic knowledge about. I mean, this is Zoom, which has a lot of the same functionality and things than Microsoft, but I know at least the public sector, there are some things that make them, they can't use Zoom for their work meetings. They have to use Microsoft Teams. Skype is on its way out, so that has been an option. So that's why I'm thinking it's relevant to know about the Microsoft 365. And even if it's, for setting up intranets and using SharePoint, there's a lot of things, and it's all, the Microsoft world. But it's not the only relevant system by far. There's, yeah.
Interesting. Thank you so much, Anne.
My final message is that I hope that I've inspired you to good information management habits, to delete and to categorize.